Three, two, one. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Failure Friday, where we get to talk to some pretty interesting people from all different walks of life of how failure has improved their life, maybe not in the moment when it happened, but how it has made them better, whether it's in their career, in their family, in their love life, anything. And we just share that to add value to our lives, to the people's watching's lives, and to kind of process some of these events as we go through that journey together. And today we have Jody Lane. Jody is an assistant regional director at Raymond James Corporation, also a landlord. I added that part. You did not put that in your intro. And a yoga instructor. She has successfully managed to combine two incredibly different industries to create a really fascinating professional harmony for herself and the people around her. And I have known Jody since my first big girl job at Raymond James, fresh out of college. And we both were in such different places in our lives. So it's really cool to see how you've evolved since then. That was 2015. So it's been almost 10 years now. So going on seven?
Yep.
Maybe 8. Yeah, so why don't you, it's insane how much fast time passes. But when I met Jody, when I was still living in the Tampa area, she was not a yoga instructor. She was not an assistant regional director in the space that she's in now. She seems so much happier. So I'm kind of excited just for you to walk us through how that transition happened. So why don't you start there? How did you go from where I met you to where you are now?
So it's kind of a roundabout story. I'll just give you a little background just to fill in the blanks. I started at Raymond James when I had my daughter. So I had my son at 22 and I had my daughter at 27. And I was like, okay, you need to have a job that has insurance because it's responsible enough to have children without a plan. But now that you have them, you better get a plan together. So I got a job at Raymond James just processing paperwork and worked my way up. When I had Ella Jet, I just got my AA. So, I tried to go to school with a brand new baby and starting a career, and it was hard. It was not great. So I stopped, and I basically went on and off until 2018. I call it the 27-year plan. So, I moved up in my career, and once I got to asset management, I had a pretty good job. It was interesting. It was market related, so it never got old. I don't feel like it was the most gratifying area to be in, but it was, stable. But I didn't feel like I wanted to go ask somebody for a job without that piece of paper, even though in my soul I knew I didn't need it. People want to see you can jump through those hoops. And as you know, there's admin assistants with master's degrees these days. So I knew in the back of my head, like as soon as I graduate, I am gonna, look for a new job. So I graduated in 2018, and my reward to myself was to take a yoga teacher training that I had, been working on and off, long story short, 2 jobs for most of my life. And so I had finally gotten to the point where I didn't need to work 2 jobs anymore. I had accomplished this goal of getting through college. And so I went to yoga teacher training, and my kids always marked my life as before YTT and after YTT because it changed me so much. It was a really beautiful experience, and while it wasn't the smoothest, I don't think, it wouldn't make sense for my journey to be any different than it has been. So I got that behind me and did some things in my home, and I called Jody Perry, who is a friend of mine, who's president on the RJFS side, the independent side of Raymond James, and said, should I go on the road for asset management? So those of you who don't know, there's a lot of traveling involved sometimes in sales. Mm-hmm. And anyway, after a discussion, she said, I think you might like a role over here in regional management. And it was a really awesome experience to go to a different place and have your skills that you bring to the table, such as health and wellness, viewed as an asset, not a detriment. I don't have to fit in the mold in the job that I'm in, and some of the things I bring to the table are unique and valued. So it was good. I think if I wouldn't have gained confidence over all that time, I wouldn't have been able to, make that move. But it's been a great transition. My boss, Kirk Bell, he is really supportive of the health and wellness initiative. So I did a 4-week meditation series recently with my financial advisors where We did
So cool.
a Friday for 4 weeks in a row. So every Friday for the month of January, and I taught a different breath technique every time, and it just basically explored, neuroplasticity and how your brain can rewire itself, and how you can activate your sympathetic nervous system to get yourself out of fight and flight, and just some tips and techniques that people can use, because no matter what your job is, stress is part of life, especially having come through COVID. So it's been a really great mix for me to support financial advisors, but also be able to dabble a little bit in the things that make my heart happy. So,
well, it's not only it's a fascinating mix, but I'm also I was just surprised you were allowed to do it. So it's for people watching who don't know Jody, she is just like a bona fide hippie. So just her being in the corporate structure that we met in alone was kind of like, what is this chick doing here? Like, she's like, this is math, and she's like laid back and chill, which is probably why you were so successful at it, because it was refreshing. People weren't expecting to speak to someone like you when they're getting sold. When I met you in asset management, you could tell you were on autopilot, though. Like, I didn't meet you, coming into that role. You'd already been there for several years, and you could tell this was a stepping stone to something else by the time I got there. When you made, I guess, at what point did you approach your boss now about combining those two things? And how did you do that?
yeah, so we talked about it when I interviewed for the role. He had a focus that our team motto is taking advisors from functioning to flourishing. And I think the way that he views it is you have to look at the whole person. Our personal lives are part of the game. And if one area of your life is off, then it kind of throws everything else off. And I think having that open mind and approach that's like, let's talk about some of the things that are interesting to you. So I think, whereas when you met me, like, call me a hippie or whatever, I felt like a fish out of water that was looked down upon as, not professional enough, or, maybe too real. But when you're working with the people that I work with, it's actually an asset to not have any pretense, to not have, a big ego
Huge
about
asset.
yeah. So I think I'm relatable, and I think that helped in that past job. Whether management recognizes it or not isn't really relevant to me. I can say that now, Kendall. At the time it was like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm a really great employee. Like, why don't you see that in me? But, in hindsight, you project what you feel about yourself, right? And then people pick up on that energy. So I just am in such a different place. And if I think about even who I was outside of work when I met you and who I am now, I was just talking to a good friend of ours, Heather. We went for a walk this afternoon, and I can think back to different situations during that time period, and this is the first time in my life that I've really felt like I actually know what I like and who I am, and I see the characteristics about myself that always made me feel like I didn't fit in as an asset now. And I think that's a shift that was twofold. One was getting out of an environment, which is a sales environment that's a high pressure job, and then being under different leadership where they are willing to look at a whole person and say, you know what, wait a minute, maybe this isn't what everybody else is doing, but maybe this is what we need. Maybe this will be an asset to the team. And it has been, it's been really good, and
sure.
It's been fulfilling.
How would you describe, we probably should have started with this, how would you describe what you do to people who don't understand our industry?
Yeah, so there's like 4 main things that I do in my job. So I cover the central division of the United States, and so we split the region in half. I cover Oklahoma, half of Texas, North Dakota, South Dakota, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. And there's about 550 offices across our whole region, so I might cover 300, something like that. So I go out and I visit with the offices. I ask them how their experience at Raymond James is going. Are there areas we're falling short? I look for ways that I can add value to their business. Can I add minutes into your day? Is there a way that we can be more efficient? What are the areas of the firm that are working well, and what are some things that you'd like to learn more about? So that might be getting a group of advisors together for a study group and right now we're doing the lightning round series where we're doing 15 minutes, where we spend 15 minutes once a week to introduce them to a different area of the firm to just gain familiarity with the different resources that are available. I work in the recruiting side of things, so we're vetting advisors that are looking to join Raymond James. That's a part of what we do. Compliance, obviously, if somebody runs afoul, they're doing something that is inappropriate, we have to deal with those types of issues. And then just basically business enhancement and relationship building. So I'm going next week to Colorado for a few days. The week after that, I'll go to Northeast Texas. And it's really nice to go to these different towns and get a feel for what the communities are like and what their needs are, because every place is so different. As you can imagine, that's a wide swath of the U.S. that I cover. So the people in Montana are different than the people in Colorado and Texas. So it's been really good for me. It's made me a much more open-minded person to other points of view. I'm not saying I think I know everything, but just seeing something from a different perspective is really helpful. It gives you a better understanding of what guides people and makes them tick, if you will.
Well, first of all, you have some pretty awesome states in your territory. Like Montana is definitely my favorite state. And then
Wyoming,
beautiful states.
gorgeous.
Wyoming, Colorado. I mean, like you got some really, and ones that I would say that the general stereotypical culture really aligns with, like nature and beauty, things that you're really into. I didn't even really understand the full scope of your job. So that was good for me to finally hear that. How important was the switch in leadership across the different roles, like the leadership style, and making you feel more confident in your job?
It was really everything, but there's also, it's a different ask. So being in a sales role, it's what have you done for me lately? You have goals, you have budgets, you hit those budgets, they give you new budgets.
It's true.
In and of itself, it's a stressful environment, where this is more of a supportive role, which is good for my personality. I like to help people. I like to be reactive. And while I do proactive things, a lot of what I do is what I would call putting out fires. So not every personality is geared towards that. Somebody wants a special exception on something, or let me run the scenario by you. Is this going to be within the guidelines of what we can do? But I definitely don't feel the pressure that I felt in my old role. And I think some of that is the personality of the leadership, and some of that is the role itself. But I will say that the leadership I'm under right now is hands down the best leadership. I feel like when someone's looking for the right things you do, it makes you so loyal, and you want to make their life easier, and you want to make things run well, when you feel like no matter what you do, there's just going to be another goal, which is the nature. It's not to say anything bad about the role, but it's just the nature of the job. It just, it isn't as rewarding. Now, there were really rewarding aspects of that job, like when I would meet with clients by invitational visits, and high net worth clients would come in. You might get somebody that was a farmer that won the lottery, and being able to explain
that's cool.
Complicated financial concepts to people and break it down simply is, a skill that I have that, came in really handy, and I really enjoyed. I enjoyed people leaving saying, man, thank you. That was really cool. I feel like I understand so much better than I did when I came in here. So, there was pros and cons of each thing, but also I was in asset management. It'll be 25 years in January. I've been with Raymond James, and I was in asset management for 14 years. That's a long time to do something. So
very long time.
And the more product that comes out, the more you have to try to remember. And what I loved about the market, then I suddenly didn't care anymore. And I'm a lot further away from the market than I used to be. And sometimes that doesn't feel great, but I surround myself with people that know, so I kind of stay up that way. But I guess that would be the downside, is I'm not as close to what's going on in the market as I used to be, but I don't feel like I need to be for the role that I'm taking on. I need to know more the regulatory landscape and, the different issues that are going to be facing our advisors versus the ins and outs of the markets. There's experts that handle that just fine, and I've done that. So.
Well, and that aspect is always going to be there, right? So that is the aspect that I love about my job, is that that landscape is constantly changing, and to me, it's fascinating. I couldn't imagine not following it. But I think that if I found a job that really fed my soul in a different way, it's something that I would still follow. So that's always there.
Yeah.
What
Mm-hmm.
what experience, whether it's life, whether it's personal, what experience of failure has had a major contribution to who you are today and how well you're doing today?
So I don't think I realized that what my failure was until I switched jobs probably, and maybe about, let's see, maybe 2 years ago. But I'd say I thought about this, and my biggest failure was a failure to show up for myself in so many times in my life. You know, I put everybody in the whole world before me. I put, just the fact that I've worked 2 jobs most of my life. I've made a lot of decisions where I put myself on the back burner to the point of not even knowing, what I like or who I am, and kind of minimizing my assets, and really just saying, well, if I could just make this person happier or that person happier, if everyone else is happy, I'll be happy. And that's bullshit. It's just not true. It's just not true. But I just couldn't see it. I was really wrapped up into, if I'm not the one who fixes it, it's not going to get fixed. And really, I just needed to remove myself from some toxic situations in order to have the space to be able to view things from a different perspective. So, when you're a mom and you have small kids and you have a lot of pressure, I'm not saying I would go back and do things differently, because, I wasn't thriving. I was just trying to get by and doing the best I could. You can armchair quarterback and look back and be like, I should have left my marriage a lot sooner. I should have, there's a million things you could have done different, but it shaped me to be who I am today. And I really am proud of, what I've overcome, because it's definitely, I've had a lot of challenges. Everybody has challenges, right? That's like the Buddhist saying where they send the monk out to look for somebody who's never had suffering and tells them to come back, and couldn't knock on a door where you didn't run into suffering. That's just part of the game here that we live on Earth. But I think I've just gotten to the point where I've learned to trust my own path and trust myself and value what I bring to the table. But I don't think you can do that when you're mired in toxicity, whether that's in a work environment or a home environment. So, what do I wish I would have got to this point sooner? Sure, of course. But, I look at the example I've set for my kids, and, I've created 2 beautiful human beings that know no limits to what they can do, because they know that if they believe in themselves, they can do anything. And, I'm proof of that to them, and they really see that in my journey. So that feels good.
Well, and that's part of the value of that is, yes, you had a long journey that had a lot of struggle in it, but your kids got an
27-year
age.
plan, baby.
Yeah, but your kids they were at the age to where they could appreciate that. They got to see it. So like a lot of
Yeah.
people that, I'm not going to say a lot, many people, maybe not majority, but a lot of their struggle happens early on in their life. And it maybe doesn't last as long as yours did. And their kids, the people who could really take away something great from watching you go through that, don't remember it. Your kids witnessed it, so that's something that they'll hold close to them the rest of their life. I think that seeing you struggle is something they'll pull strength from when they're struggling.
Yeah. And I think seeing them, I think them seeing me finally show up for myself is like, okay, yeah, I think that means a lot to them.
And at a time, because they're both adults, if you don't know her children, at a time where they can appreciate what that means, right? They're not 8 or 9. They saw you show up when they were also adults, and they can apply that to their own situation when they come across it as well. I think that there's
and I think that's the key.
Value.
I think that's the key, is when they come across it, right? Because until you have something relatable in your life, it's hard to learn from other people's words, like experience teaches. So when you hit a spot in your life that's kind of reminiscent of something, like, oh, yeah, mom went through that actually, So until it resonates with you, and I'm sure you know that, right? Looking at your parents, seeing them from a different perspective as a mom yourself.
Oh my gosh,
you view
it's life-changing.
so differently.
It's life-changing. Yeah. I mean, I've apologized to my mom a lot. We don't have the most like incredible, perfect relationship, but having children made me realize that her and my dad are just trying their best. And I've said this in other episodes, but I think before I had kids, and especially as a teenager or a young adolescent, I looked at my parents as like they were supposed to have all the answers. And when they either led me astray or they didn't handle something the way maybe I thought it should have been handled, I would get really upset because I'm like, how could you mislead me? You have all the answers. You chose to mislead me. And as a parent, I realized that I mean, I still looked at my parents as my parents, but now it was more as like these imperfect human beings who have no idea what they're doing. They're just trying to do their best with everything they have going on. And that revelation, which might seem silly to people watching this, I mean, but it was like a light bulb moment. So now whenever something happens in my familial relationships, I'm like, they're just doing their best.
Yeah. Grace is the word that I use
Grace.
for it. You know, it gives you grace. Gives you grace for other people because, you know, like I had no business having a kid at 22 years old as a bartender, and you know, like what kind of decision was that to make? You know, luckily it turned out okay, but no, you know, and the funny thing was I had been in that really bad car accident. I got hit by a semi truck, and
oh my gosh, I forgot about that, Jode.
Yeah, and I knew I was going to get money from this lawsuit, you know, which I ended up getting like $35,000. So that's hysterical in and of itself, that I thought that somehow that was going to set me up to be able to be a mom. But I did make a good decision. I bought a house with apartments in the back, and I rented the apartments, and the apartments paid for more than my mortgage. So I made some smart calls, and my sister was pretty helpful in kind of guiding me of, you know, what to do. But I remember thinking, well, you know, I don't really have a good reason to have an abortion because I'm going to have money, and you know, like it's my fault, I wasn't responsible, which, like, looking back at it now, like that is such ridiculous logic. But that's where I was at, you know. I was like, you know, you're irresponsible, you need to do the right thing. And, you know, of course I don't view it that way now, and everything turned out great, and I have 2 beautiful kids, but whew, what a roll of the dice that was.
I bet that I can't imagine how difficult that, because right now I'm studying to take my 65 on Friday. And I'm not doing as well as the first time I took it, which was, oh my God, like you hear people say this, but when you are studying for a test of this magnitude and complexity with children, it is just, I couldn't imagine doing that when I was younger and just didn't have the patience or the wisdom that I have now. Because I was 21 the last time I took that. That was almost 8 years ago. And it's so much harder. So I couldn't imagine being at that age and having kids and then trying to go to school, then getting a job. I mean, that happens every day in this country, around the world, but more power to you, because I've broken down a couple times these past 2 weeks. Just mainly the part that has gotten me is just the sacrifice hurts a lot more now when you have kids, right? Because if I'm studying, because after this I'm going to go and study till probably 3 a.m. It's at the expense of seeing my kids, and that's hard. And as a young woman, basically a child having a kid, I don't know how I would have processed that emotionally.
Yeah. I got my Series 7 a year after I started Raymond James, and I think Ella Jet would have been like 3 and Noah would have been 7. But I got my 9 and 10 for this job, and it felt a lot more overwhelming. Of course, you don't remember, so it's so long ago, but the studying was just not enjoyable, that's for sure.
Not at all. I wanted to rewind back to something you said before we got a little bit off topic, and that was being a people pleaser. Were you always like that? Was that a childhood thing, or did that happen due to insecurity with your marriage?
No, I've always used humor as my coping mechanism. So when I was younger, I was the class clown. I was the one trying to like keep everything together by everything being funny. I grew up in a super religious family, so we were at church all the time, but like it felt hypocritical kind of church, you know, where it's one thing at church and another thing at home. And So I always was the peace. Was the peacekeeper, and my way of keeping peace was just trying to walk on eggshells so that everything was okay. So I felt like if I could just balance enough plates in the air, spin enough plates at once, then everything would be okay. But it was at the detriment of myself. I mean, when you're younger and you're a kid, it's a survival mechanism. When you move into a marriage, I feel like it's a lot more soul crushing than I guess you don't know the difference, but then as you get older, you see the patterns are repeating.
What's soul crushing?
Throughout that. It's more soul crushing as a parent trying to function in a toxic environment than when you're, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's probably not necessarily true. But I think as a kid, I guess I just didn't. I had the home life to deal with, but I didn't have other people I was responsible for. I guess that would be the big difference. You've got 3 people. I put my husband in the somebody I was responsible for category.
No, definitely. I mean, I feel sometimes like I'm responsible for AJ, but your situation was a little bit different. Do you think your kids, how do I word this correctly? Do you think your kids have trauma of their own from you being like that?
They definitely have trauma from things that they've gone through because of my actions, because of me staying in a situation that wasn't healthy for too long, that impacted them negatively for sure. And those are probably the hardest things. That, and time I can't get back, especially with Ella, when she was 15 years old and she was going through a lot, and I had a new boyfriend and I was excited about it, and she was hurting from a divorce and felt like she lost her dad and her mom at the same time. And we've talked about it and we've worked through it. And I'm not saying I was the worst mom in the world, but definitely a blind spot. But she was able to understand that I was coming off of years of being so unhappy that I was just happy to be happy, to not be crying every day. And so I've heard her, and she's been able to hear me, and God, I wish I could go back and be like, this is not important, this is what's important. And like I said, it's not like I was a total drop of the ball, because she didn't want to be around me, and so I went, well, you don't want to be around me anyway. But looking back on it, I would have been like, what, I don't care if she wants me around or not, I'm going to be here, so that whether she wants me around or not, she knows that I'm here. And that's something that I have the bandwidth for now that I didn't at the time. That's probably one of my big regrets when it comes to the parenting side of things.
But I think that's beautiful that you can recognize that and talk about that with her. So I mean, obviously as parents, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fuck up your kids, guys. There's no getting around that. You will fuck up your kids. I think how you handle, how you traumatize your children after the trauma has happened is what makes or breaks parenting. So what advice would you give to young parents, or maybe parents of young teens, or maybe kids that are your age?
Yeah.
How do they cope? How do you fix some of that?
Well, one thing that I learned through therapy, and I really credit my therapist and Elijah, and I see the same therapist, and Noah sees them occasionally, but boundaries, man. When you grow up letting people push through your boundaries, and you teach your kids that they can push through your boundaries, and you're not doing them any favors by rescuing them, So it was tough when I first started putting up boundaries, and I was able to hey, listen, I don't care how mad you are, regardless of which child it is, you can't talk to me like that. That's not going to work for me. So here's what's going to happen next time something goes down and things escalate. I'm going to walk away, and we're going to revisit it the next day. That was not an easy place for me to get to. So I would say start early. Don't feel selfish having those boundaries. I also was one of those parents that, and I've learned some of this, Instagram's a freaking beautiful thing for parents. Some of these child psychologists give the best advice, just little short snippets of how to handle things. I was big on, my parents always said, because I said so, and I was like, I'll never do that to my kids. Well, I over-explained everything to death, and then you create these master manipulators that can just, talk their way out of anything, because you've taught them if they come up with the right enough spiel and a good argument, then they have some wiggle room, So I've seen some of the things on Instagram that I'm like, man, I wish I had that. Or she'll say, no, you tell the kid, no, you can't do that. And I know that you're going to be upset about that. And you just take as much time as you need to be upset, because I'm sure that's disappointing, but that's not something we can do today. I was like, what? So allowing them to have their feelings, but not like having to renegotiate it for 20 years. So
That's actually really
there's
good
some
advice.
toxic things about the internet, but there's some really great
I
things
just
about
was
the
talking
internet.
about this last night, that everyone, I feel like, is constantly making fun of millennials for spending so much time on the internet, but it's kind of like the power's in your hands on how you want to use it, right? There's so much free resources on especially social media. Like, there's so much free advice on there. Yeah, sure, you're gonna have some people that give you like just enough to make you like click on their link, but there's also a lot of profiles like what you're talking about that will give you something that you would have had to pay hourly for. That's what
and simple little 5 minutes that is going to be like, I mean, I've had so many
profound
friends
impacts.
that have teenagers. They'll like send it, hey, do you follow, if you don't follow so-and-so, they have teenagers that are 15, 16, they're going through the same, and it's like you feel like you have an ally in your court that says, here's a simple way, do this. It's like, oh, like, it's just stuff you don't know, and if you have an open mind and you're willing to spend the time in the right places on the internet,
Yeah, one of the biggest things, so much. So like, and one of the biggest things I, as a parent, want to strive, because I'm pretty early on in this whole parenthood thing, but one of the biggest pieces of advice that I want to strive to live by, I got from Instagram, and that was to always apologize to your children. Like, you don't have to over-explain, but to apologize. So there's times where I come home, because there's many days where I come home and regretfully I have a really short fuse, because I've just been making decisions all day, and that takes a lot out of me, at least. And I might yell at my kids, who are literally babies, for something that I shouldn't be yelling at them for. And then I take a deep breath, I process in my head, like, you should not have yelled at Kenny for this. She's 3.
Yeah.
And then I go and I sit her down and I apologize and I tell her why I did that. And I hope I'm not creating a master manipulator, but I do think it's valuable to show your kids early on that you are not perfect.
Yeah. I think that's different. I think owning your shit is a very, very powerful and important thing, and it teaches your kids that they're not expected to be perfect either, that they're allowed to be human and they're allowed to make mistakes. And if you can't ever be vulnerable or wrong in front of your kids, then you're creating people that are going to have a hard time taking a look at themselves and admitting when something goes wrong, because they just are striving for perfection.
Yeah, for sure. I think that in my childhood, it's funny when I hear like my mom or dad talk about my childhood, or other people who knew me, are like, oh, everything was just so easy for you. It wasn't. Like, I attributed my value. I was a people pleaser. Like, I would try so hard to do so well at something because I wanted someone to tell me I was good at it. And it took me a long time as an adult to figure out where that came from, because I do the same thing as an adult. I was doing it in my career as advisor. I was taking on way too much stuff, going far outside the scope of my work, and setting an unrealistic expectation with my clients that I'd be able to sustain that level of service, because I just wanted to be valuable to them. And that goes back to what you said, you're being a people pleaser, and that caused me to have resentment towards people that had nothing to do with them, because it's on, like, if I'm providing that level of service to them, and then at some point I can't give it anymore, but naturally they're still expecting it, that's my fault. That's not their fault.
That's where the boundaries come in, though, right? Because, you're handing out a slip of paper to someone saying, you can treat me this way, you can treat me that way. Like, you're the one who's driving that show by creating boundaries that allow us to have a clear pathway. I think it's Brene Brown that says, the happiest people are people with good boundaries.
I agree. And I'm learning that now. I would say the last year I've gotten a lot more intentional with politely setting. I definitely think that we live in a world now where it's like, do what makes you happy. I think there's a happy mix there, right? Like, you should still if you say you're going to do something, you should still strive to do it, but you should also look out for yourself. So I'm actively learning to set those boundaries. I'm getting better at it. How did you, so where I struggle is, or where I struggled is, I would have these relationships, whether professionally or personally, where I already set the precedence of having little to no boundaries, but now I'm starting to set those boundaries, right? So there's going to be an obvious shift in that relationship. How did you, during your transition from people pleaser to independence, how did you start to set those?
I would have conversations and say, I want to look at the way that I show up in my life and how I'm going to show up in my relationship with you is one of those things. And it's not easy for me to change dynamics, but I want to do it because I want to have a good, healthy relationship with you. And if I give too much of myself away, then I resent you for it, and that's not your fault. So you can help me by just bear with me as I start to institute these boundaries. And when I first did it, of course, I think my daughter was like 17, so that was hard. But we both were willing to work on it. We got in counseling and said, okay, we don't swear at each other anymore. That's a new boundary we're setting. That's just, no matter how mad we are, we don't swear at each other. And that's a starting point that we're both willing to commit to. And then slowly we would build off of that, So, and I am not as great at it with, like, I do still have it with friends. I want to be the fun house to come hang out at, and I want to, try to get my time in with everybody. And sometimes it's easy to overextend that way. But even then, I feel like I'm pretty good at saying, yeah, I think I'm just going to chill. I've lived alone for a long time now, so I'm pretty good at filling up my time. But I would say mostly with my kids, I've basically had a conscious decision to say, like, look, I have some unhealthy patterns that I've created along the way, whether they're from how I grew up or how I've been, but this isn't how I want to show up in our relationship. And luckily I have, two people that want to evolve and be better people too,
Yeah, I would definitely say you're lucky that you have that, because it can go a totally different way when you have people that are the opposite of that. Did you approach professional relationships in the same way? I feel like you can't be that honest in a professional relationship.
Yeah, I've struggled. I've definitely been caught when I'm traveling at offices where I've spent way too much time, like 4 hours, which is well beyond the scope of what my intention was, just because I wasn't sure how to try to wrap it up, and felt like maybe the person needed someone, an ear to bend, and I didn't really have anywhere that I had to be. But then afterwards, I still had a 3-hour drive that I had to do that, wasn't the healthiest thing for me, or took on some emotional baggage from somebody that, yeah, they were having a hard time, but as an empath, then how do I rid myself of that? Because I still have, 7 more offices that I still have to get to visit. And then how is that going to impact how I show up for them? So I did kind of learn the hard way and say, okay, I'm planning on spending this much time together, send a meeting request, or, just make clear what your intentions are. Take your own car, so that you have control when you get into a situation. If you go out somewhere and you ride with somebody else, then you're kind of at their mercy as to when they want to leave. And, I've pretty much cut out drinking. I might have a beer once in a while, but a lot of the functions that we deal with in a work environment are alcohol related. So, when the time's up and I'm done, I'm not going to go to the bars and hit the circuit with people. And I'm very frank with that. Yeah, I'm not a big drinker. It gives me anxiety. But you guys have a fun time. It was really nice catching up with you. And then excuse myself. And most people, if you're not gonna be on their vibe, they don't want to hang out with you anyway. So it's not like they're gonna hold it against you. But it's that inner pressure that you put on yourself. Well, I only see them this often. So with work, I would say it's been trial and error for me. And going from being the expert in your field, someone everyone comes to answer questions, to starting really from scratch in a totally different field, totally different skill set, totally different knowledge base. It was definitely a harder shift than I thought it was, because I'm like, well, what value am I adding? In the beginning, it was just my time, my time that I'm willing to give you. So now that it's been 3 years, I have much more than just my time to add in value when I go visit people. I have a greater understanding of, you know, the way that they need to navigate the organization and what can help them in their daily practice.
And as you get more confident, it's easier to set those boundaries, I think, mainly because you're more efficient with how you deliver information. That's a great example of what I was doing. I mean, with some of my early clients, which I still have, I mean, some of our initial appointments would be 4 hours long because they needed to unload, and I just wanted to add value. So I would just lend my ear, like you said, but it was so emotionally taxing. Like, I remember I sat at an appointment for like 5 hours one time and just listened to someone talk for 95% of it. And I got home and I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I say no? Or why can't I exit or, wrap things up? And that's something that I learned not to beat myself up about, because one, it's incredibly common when you get into a new career. Does it make it right? No. But it's something that a lot of people do. And I try to, when I see it happening, call people out on it and let them know that, hey, I've been there. Try to spend some time addressing that, on why you're doing this, what you can do to provide a solution so you're not, or especially time. You can't get back time.
Right. And that is a hard one. And also the resiliency to be able to shake off whatever you just experienced, right? Because if someone's spending 4 hours with you, chances are they've got some heavy stuff that and some of it's probably related to their finances, and some of it is just related to their life. And you're somebody that, for whatever reason, I think you and I are both empathetic people. We're both caring people. You provide a safe space for them to unload. And then, what does that look like for you afterwards? So I definitely think, especially when I travel, meditation's a really big part of me setting myself up for the day, just having that consistency of, that's 15 minutes, that's just mine, that no matter what, I bake into my schedule to kind of set the tone for, okay, and here we go, because intentionality it doesn't take long to go, okay, I'm going to go in this meeting. I'm meeting with 5 people. This is going to be a good meeting. I'm going to connect with everybody. I'm going to see the light that's shining in each and every one of these people. Like, I'll say that in my head, especially if I know I'm going into a situation that might be more challenging, somebody that's going to have much different viewpoints on the world than I do. How can I show up kind and professional when I disagree with a lot of things that they say? And so I think that intentionality is really helpful in what we do and for the kind of people that we are. Like, kind of like an energetic boundary you're putting up for yourself.
So
that's my hippie shit that you knew I was gonna throw it in.
No, but like,
somewhere.
I appreciate it, because these are things that you're definitely a hippie in more ways than one. But this is stuff that I wish more people instead of just listening to people who talk about it, they actually did it. Because I'm not an expert in breath work, and I would love to know your day-to-day breath work. But when I would sit, and I need to get back to this. This is a good reminder, Jody. When I would sit before an appointment, I would sit and I would take 10 really deep breaths in, and then I would go like this. I learned that in Tony Robbins. I don't know why. He just tells you to go like this and breathe really hard. And I guess it's just to, I don't know, fill you with air. I'm sure there's a science behind it. But the whole energy of that experience would begin with excitement. And I think that for at least my personality, that was a game changer. It really made a huge difference.
It's setting the intention. It really is, because so much of what we create, I mean, our thoughts have energy. That's proven, right? So every thought has energy attached to it. So if you can control what your thoughts are, you can control what your intentions are, you can control the outcome. So if you go into a meeting with the intention that I'm going to find something I connect with this person on, and I'm going to show up in a way that's respectful of me and myself, to where I don't feel like I'm compromising my integrity, but I also am going to show up for this person in a way that they feel heard and seen. And somehow it magically happens that way when you set the intention. I call it segment intending, right? Intending. So as you go through each part of your day, anytime you're switching from one thing to another, and I tell my advisors, before you meet with a client, if you want to do the 4-7-8, do you watch have you ever seen Ted Lasso?
What is that?
Ted Lasso. So Ted Lasso is a show on, I think it's on HBO, about I think it's a football coach that gets hired to coach soccer in England. It's a great show, but anyway, there's one scene where the psychiatrist is saying to don't forget your 4-7-8. So on a way to engage your parasympathetic nervous system before you meet with clients, or if you're feeling particularly stressed out. When I get stressed, my skin gets hot, and that's how I know, like, okay, something's pushing my buttons, because like physically my skin feels hot. So you can inhale through your belly, so envision your belly filling up to the count of 4. Hold your breath to the count of 7, and then slowly blow out through pursed lips to the count of 8. It's called like a natural tranquilizer, and engages your sympathetic nervous system, so it's kind of a reset for you. So if you did 5 rounds of that before every client, you're just going to go into your meeting with a calm presence. So that's something that I've shared with my advisors. I had a group out in Oklahoma that we did a little meditation basics class, 15 minutes, and I did that technique with them, and they're all like, oh yeah, I feel good. I'm ready to go through the rest of my day.
Okay, wait, so say it again so my brain remembers it. So you go, you breathe with your belly.
Inhale. Yep, inhale in through your belly, through your nose, the count of 4. So count to 4, hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can use I use a mala, pocket mala. And so for each round, I'll do a round of breath. So in 4, hold 7, out 8, and then I switch to the next speed. I just go around one time, and then my meditation's done. So it's, for me, having something to have my mind focus on.
You go around that whole bracelet?
Mm-hmm.
How long does that take
like 15 minutes.
Okay.
15 minutes, yeah. But, I say start slow. I remember when I first started meditating, 10 minutes seemed like forever. And now 15 minutes.
I can do 5
for me.
Right now I'm at 5.
Yeah. Start with 5
before my brain's
5 that
everywhere.
You weren't doing. Yeah. And, that's normal. That's part of being alive and being human. So that's one thing that has really helped me, is to stop the judgment. It's really about the observation, not the judgment, because you're not doing anything wrong, because your mind is, that's what it's designed to do. It's evolved over time to be like, what should we be afraid of? And it creates problems if there isn't one. It's just going to be like, how can we solve something? I want to be useful. So it's just doing what it's been trained to do.
Do you have
just watching it takes...
I'm sorry. I remember when I was at your house years ago, you had a guided meditation that you used. Do you still use that?
Yeah, I do. There's a lady that you can get on Spotify, Sarah Blondin.
Oh my God, she's amazing.
Blondin. She's amazing.
You sent me her stuff when I was going through that recent catastrophe, the trading issue.
Yeah.
And I was just distraught. And I remember going on a run, which I don't run, but I needed to, because I figured anything to clear my mind. And I've never run without music. But I was like, you know what? Let's see what this Sarah Blondin bitch has got to say. And I ran to one of her things, and it was insane.
Did you cry?
Oh my God, I cried so hard, Jody.
Yeah.
It was so bad. I had to go to the side of the road.
She's on Insight Timer too.
I can't find what's Insight Timer.
She saved me through so many hard times. Insight Timer is an app that you can download, and it's a meditation app. So it has hundreds, probably thousands of meditation teachers on there.
Are there more of hers?
But she has, there's a bunch more of hers. So what's on Spotify, I believe, is from the book she wrote. I haven't read the book, but I think with each chapter of the book comes a meditation. And so that's like the compilation of meditations. But there's some older ones that are on, there's one about change that I absolutely love off of Insight Timer. She saved me. And I think she definitely helped with my self-esteem issues for sure. Just, making you realize we are all perfect creations of God. We are worthy just from existing. You don't have to do or be anything or have anything or show anything or prove anything. You are worthy just from being alive.
Yes. I can't remember the name of the one I listened to specifically, but she made something that will stick with me forever. She said 2 things that will stick with me forever. She said, move like water. And I was like, wait, that makes so much sense. And you had when I was talking to you and asking for advice on this particular situation beforehand, you had told me to lean in and, stop trying to control it. And she said, move like water and approach every problem not with anxiety, but with a sense of curiosity. Almost to say, like, how is this going to turn out? Isn't this interesting?
Yep.
And I was just like, oh
Isn't
my God.
this interesting? Because it de-arms everything, right? So like your brain wants to catastrophize everything. That's what your brain wants to do. It wants to make a problem out of something. And, you know, if you want to put it in Buddhist terms, the situation is what it is, right? Like the story, the Buddhist story of, my Buddhist stories, but there's a man whose son finds a bunch of wild horses, and the neighbor comes over and says, oh, how lucky for you that your son found all these horses. And the father's like, well, maybe. And then the next day, the son is trying to ride one of these wild horses and falls off and breaks his leg. And the neighbor says, oh, how unfortunate for you. Your son has a broken leg. And he's like, well, maybe. Well, then the army comes through, and he doesn't go with the army because his leg's broken. So, things just are what they are, and we want to make them mean something. And so, that's part of humaning for me is how can I just find, just for the sheer joy of it, right? I just want to do it because I want to try to be happy. And if your joy is constantly dependent on a specific outcome, that's a recipe for disaster.
It is. I agree with that. But that's not to say
that
that
you can't strive.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was about to
Yeah.
It's not to say that you shouldn't try. That'd be like me saying, well, I don't want to take this test on Friday, so I'm just not going to study anymore. No, I think that there's beauty in accomplishments. I think that validating your existence and deriving value from your accomplishments is a dangerous game because you will never be satisfied. And that's where I'm finally starting to come to terms with is I don't need to constantly get these accolades. My value doesn't derive from my AUM. It doesn't derive by how much money I make. I am happy when I can accomplish something and then be home by 5:30 and have dinner.
Yeah.
That's a great day for me when I can accomplish something, impact my clients' lives, but then come home and see my kids before bedtime and like put them to bed. Like that to me is happiness. And before I thought that the reason why I originally I didn't want kids was because I thought I had to choose. And you don't. You really don't. I think finding a balance should be the main focus of people's lives and not this hyper sense of success and financial well-being, which is real rich coming from a financial advisor. But
so, there's something to be said about not having to worry about finances. It's a huge, huge accomplishment, and I'm just there within the last year to where I really don't feel worried about money anymore. Like, no, I'm going to be okay. Some of that, I've put my head in the sand, even though I'm a financial advisor. I put my head in the sand not wanting to look at my financial plan because I felt like I was behind from my divorce, from all my circumstances. And then when I actually took the time and looked at it, I looked at it with DJ, and I was like, oh, okay, actually, go bitch, go.
Yeah. My favorite aspect about my job is doing financial plans, because I found that people think that they are because we take all of some experience, specifically the bad ones, because they're easy to remember, and we use that to judge our overall where we're at. And a financial plan, they take me forever to do, because if they're done right, they should. But when I present it to someone, they're like, oh, I'm okay. Like, it's just like, you just see the weight come off of them. I mean, it's my favorite thing to do and present are the financial plans. I haven't had one person who was expecting. Yeah, it's like, you follow this, you stay disciplined. I always use conservative numbers.
I just gotta keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, you just gotta keep doing what you're doing. Most of the time, you are better off than you think you are. So I won't take up too much more time, but how do you think failure has shaped you as a mom and as a professional? Using adjectives.
I think as a mom, it's made me very resilient, and that's a really great characteristic that I really admire in myself, is my resilience to adversity, to just life in general. In a career, I guess it's just made me feel like it's never too late to accomplish anything. Like, I still have a lot of goals ahead of myself for when I retire, and what I want to do with my yoga business and with retreats, and how I'm going to use my space. And
I wanted to talk more about that.
I just feel like not in a big rush. Like, oh, okay, you have all the time in the world. So I think having so many failures has just made me realize it's never over. It's not over till the fat lady sings. Is that inappropriate to say anymore? But I don't, I used to be like, I'm so behind. Now I'm like, oh, I'm just at this perfect place where I love my job, and I have great advisors that I work with, and I have really good friends, and I have a beautiful property where I get to have a lot of creative outlets, because I really love making beautiful spaces and beautiful things and sharing them with people. So like, I'm doing all those things, and I don't think I would be where I am without all those millions. I always learn things the hard way, Kendall, so that's how I roll.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, maybe it's because I met you after like the bulk of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But like, even the failure you discussed, like none of it was like, your kids ended up in jail, right? Like, you still, even when I met you, especially Ella was kind of going through that hard teenage stage. I mean, she still has turned into one of the most beautiful people.
They're both just amazing, and I couldn't be more proud of them. And the thing I think I'm proud of most of the mamas, they both have said, with you and Dad, I always felt like I could be whatever I wanted. Like, you always believed in me, and there wasn't any idea that wasn't a good idea. And it was nice to be raised with somebody believing you, because it made me believe in myself. So
that makes me want to cry, honestly, because I hope that there's a day where my kids say that to me. I mean, that would be like peak parenting right there.
Of course they are. They're going to do that. You're a great mom. You're just watching you grow and blossom has been awesome for me. Just, you were my kindred spirit when I first met you. I was like, I love this girl. This is weird. She's like younger than my son, but I was like, I love her.
I'm glad, because here we are.
There's no age sometimes.
I want to hear a little bit about tell us about your yoga retreats and what you do at your home /Airbnb /long-term rental. What do they entail, and how can people learn about that?
So I haven't really been posting much on my Instagram, but I have Shakti Escapes. So my LLC is Jody Lane, but Shakti Escapes is the name of our little situation we have here. We've only done one retreat so far, and at the time that I did it, I didn't have the Airbnb, so I have 2 apartments in the back. The downstairs is a 1-bedroom, the upstairs is a 2-bedroom, and a beautiful outdoor space for yoga and pool. So I Airbnb the upstairs, and right now I have a permanent tenant downstairs, but over the next year or so, I'm going to take over the bottom space and have that as my yoga studio. And I'm exploring some more modalities as well, outside of meditation. I'm looking into some hypnosis and things in the wellness space that are also up my alley. So there's a couple of different designations I want to get. I'm also looking at Brene Brown's Daring Greatly leadership training course. So I'm going to do some things that will open up some coaching opportunities. I do coaching in my job now. But eventually, I would like to be able to host retreats here to where I could host up to 8 people. And I can stay in the bottom apartment when I host, and then people can have the 2-bedroom up here and the 2-bedroom upstairs. So that gives you comfortably 8 people. The last workshop we did, we started out with a full moon ceremony, and we set some intentions and some things that we wanted to let go and some things we wanted to manifest. And then the next morning we did some yoga, some pranayama, so breath work. We talked about different breath techniques. We did a chakra class that we went through all the different chakras in the body and the different colors and the different mudras, the hand positions. And we did a 30-class yoga pose for like really getting into each pose and how to properly get in and out of the poses. We did a tea ceremony the last night. I had someone come in and do an Ayurvedic lesson on Ayurvedic cooking and Ayurvedic eating.
What's that?
We had Ayurveda. It's like an Indian, it's one of the limbs of yoga, but it's I don't know a ton about it, but it's a certain type of way that you eat for I think it's called a dosha. Anyway, I had a specialist come in and do a dinner, and she talked all about it. And then we had somebody come in and do crystal sound bowls. And then the very last night we went to this energy healer that's right down the street. So we all walked down there. So it was great. And we did some interpersonal exercises. We did a core values exercise where you chose through a certain series of exercises what your core values are. I think mine were freedom, resilience, making a difference, authenticity, and I can't remember what the last one is. But your storied self versus your authentic self, the stories you picked up along the way was one of the exercises versus what is really true of you, and what are the stories that you've just been telling for a very long time, whether your parents told them to you or whether it's something that you've done. So we kind of had a nice balance of some yoga stuff, some interpersonal activities. Really got to know each other. We had six people.
That's a workshop.
And it was really great. So what we did was 2 weekends. So they came on a Saturday night where we did the moon ceremony, and then they left, and then it was all day Sunday, and then the next weekend it was all day Saturday, and then just the morning on Sunday. So it was 2 weekends of commitment, 2 half days and 2 full days, and it was in March, and the weather was beautiful. It was a really great experience. And we did it as a test. We didn't charge a lot of money, but it really gave me a good taste for what I can expect. And then I also thought about conscious bachelorette parties for people who don't want to drink, that they don't want it centered, and some exercises
cool.
around, just connection between you and the bride. I've got some ideas in that space. And then also, kind of concierge experiences here, or if somebody wanted to bring a wedding party or a girls trip. I just hosted 7 girls, which was a tight squeeze up there in the upstairs, and we did a yoga session by the pool, and we did a moon ceremony one night, and it was beautiful. It was really lovely. It was a bunch of girls that were about to be like near 40, and they hadn't seen each other since like high school.
Oh, how cool is that?
It's great. It's really, I just know that the more I do it, the better I'll get at it. As far as teaching yoga goes, when it's something that I'm doing more frequently, I think I'll grow in that area. And hopefully that'll become the bigger part of my life as I get older.
And that's called a workshop, or is that a retreat? Like, what's the difference between those two things?
Well, that I called a workshop because you weren't sleeping over. So a retreat, you're really like leaving everything behind and staying for the weekend. So we did it was a 2-weekend workshop series. So as soon as I take over the downstairs, I had some like financial goals to get all my debt paid off. I took out some money to do the Airbnb, but I think by the end of next year at the very latest, I'll take over that bottom space, and then I'll be able to block off the months that I want to do retreats, and then I just won't rent the Airbnb out when I'm doing retreats. So I probably do 2 or 3 a year to start out with.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm seeing it from a perspective of, well, one is a beautiful way to marry your current job with what you're really passionate about. Not to say you're not passionate about your job, but you're definitely, this is a soul feeding venture. What you're doing with your house, with your home, and bringing people into your energy, essentially naming your energy the dominant energy and giving it to other people to take home with them and continue to spread that, which is so cool. I see it as an opportunity for like something I can do, like a team building activity, almost like for people that want that type of culture in their office. For me, it's really important for when I do have my own office to have a culture where everyone sees me vulnerable. I want them to feel comfortable being vulnerable. I mean, that's more important to me than making a ton of money doing what I'm doing. I want to be able 30 years from now to say, oh yeah, like, Destiny's been working here 25 years, and that's because we respect each other. And I think that things like that really feed into that. That's cool.
Yeah, I've done some team building things with my advisors, and I really like that a lot. And I'm definitely open to those kind of things too. So really, pretty much the more time that I have, the more I'll be able to come up with ideas and content. So I guess the way that I see it is like maybe writing Raymond James out the next 10 years and really learning, continuing to build my skill set and other modalities that I can offer. So when the time comes that, I'll have yoga, meditation, and maybe a slew of other things under my belt, so that if I did want to do consulting work or team building events or conscious bachelorette parties or whatever, I'll have a lot of different I envision it like a menu where you kind of choose what your weekend looks like. Some ladies might want to go visit museums or go paddleboarding or whatever. So I can kind of say, okay, here's your menu. You can choose what you want to do. Do you want to do a moon ceremony? What do you want to learn about? Do you want to do an interpersonal activity where, even those different tests that you can take where you learn the different personality types and learning to facilitate those, where you can say, okay, here's why you don't always communicate well, because this person has this style of communication and this person has this. So even those types of things. So I'm kind of building my arsenal as the time goes by, because it's great because it's helpful for what I do at Raymond James, and it's also going to be helpful for what I do on my own.
In the last round of hiring, I made, what you're talking about is an Enneagram test, and I made all the people I interviewed do an Enneagram test, and it so helpful. I believe, oh my gosh, you would ask me that. I want to say it's a 9. It's been a couple years.
I'm a classic number 7.
You are? I'm gonna have to relook them up. I need to go back and relook at my results, because I remember taking that test and getting the number and being like, oh my god, that is me. The best way is like how you handle conflict, and that was the most valuable. I was like, okay, this is useful. I'm also really excited about the hypnosis. I mean, we don't have time to go into tonight, but you have like the coolest you were the first person to ever tell me about that and to educate me on it. And like, I can't remember exactly, but you showed me like a story gosh, I wish I could remember the story that you gave me when you were first getting into it, before you put yourself through it, before you really dived into that. And I remember, thinking to myself, well, let's see what happens with Jody. And you just came back with like the craziest story about like meeting yourself, and everyone's going to listen to this think we're crazy, but it was intense. So I'm excited for you to do that. I don't know if I'm mentally
I've got a
ready
list
to
of
go
things,
through there.
so I'll just see, what's available when, and it's just kind of like the right book comes to you, or the right meditation, or the right conversation. I just am to the point where I kind of trust the path, right? So whatever shows up, I'm pretty sure that's what I think when you pray for guidance like I do, God hears your prayers, spirit, whatever, universe, whatever you want to call it, the consciousness that exists in the web that holds everything together, I feel like is actively vying on my behalf. There's no other way to explain it, of why I would be where I am.
I think the more you invest into that relationship with your creator, the more things just unravel easier. Like you realize you don't have to force things. What's meant for you genuinely, in my experience, is that when I'm closer with my creator, when I'm talking to him, when I'm reading about him and the way that connects with me, things just happen in my life, and I'm like, for me, my creator doesn't talk, at least at this point in my faith, he doesn't talk back to me, but he shows me things. And I am so much more readily receiving that when I'm spending time getting to know that relationship. And I think that would be incredibly helpful for people if during their struggle, during their chaos, during their failure, if they could just take time to get to know what is bigger than them. I think processing it would be significantly easier. I wish I had done that earlier.
And I think quieting your mind makes space for you to hear that God voice. I've gotten a lot of guidance from quieting my mind, where I'll have something that comes to me that's pretty powerful, and I'm like, okay, there's no way that was my thought, where I just feel like the right way. Like I had a situation with how to handle a situation with my sister, and I just asked God for guidance, and the perfect thing came to me of what I wanted to say and how it would be received in a loving way. And I was just like, thank you, thank you, thank you. So sometimes it's so busy that if you can just take some spare time to just quiet it, and it doesn't always get super quiet for me, and that's okay too. It doesn't take that long of that 15 minutes to get some kind of I don't know how to put it other than just guidance. That's just another way to look at a situation that gives me peace. So I've gone through periods where I've waxed and waned on meditation, but this last time I was like, this can't ever be a lapse. This has to be a constant.
Well, I think it's irresponsible of us to not explore those tools and have them in our arsenal just for shits and giggles, because it might not work for you, but to know that it exists and to say that, okay, I listened to a podcast about it, and then to use it. I mean, I feel like you're doing yourself and the people that are close to you, whether that be your spouse, your boyfriend, or your children, a disservice by not learning about these things. Like, there's just literally nothing for you to lose by not educating yourself on natural ways to calm yourself down, to deal with stress, to de-escalate situations. I mean, it's only going to make you a more well-equipped human being. If people have questions about anything we've talked about, would you prefer they contact you?
Oh, let's see. You can get me, probably the easiest way is to message me on Instagram. I'm Jody Lane. I am Jody Lane on Instagram. You can just send me a message. I have my Airbnb is out there, so you can contact me that way if you're interested in taking a look at the B&B and staying here at the property. I do offer yoga and meditation here, so people book sessions if they want to while they're staying. So you can look me up on Airbnb and find me that way as well. And then if they really want to have a chat, they can get a hold of you and get my number, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything that they want to discuss.
I love you,
I've
Jody.
had mentors show up for me in my life, and I really enjoy working with other people.
So important.
I don't think I would be who I am without the different guidance that I got along the way.
No, I mean, and that's something that I hope to. I don't feel like I've ever had like someone who I've called a mentor and then they knew they were my mentor per se. That's such a weird relationship for me, because some people are like, yeah, this is my mentor. I'm like, how did you find them? Like, where did you buy them?
Yeah.
But
where did you buy them?
I strive to be that for specifically women, not necessarily in my industry, but I just think that there's so much value we can just share with each other. And for whatever reason, a lot of people don't. You can literally change the trajectory of someone's life, or you can save them years in your case if you just take them under your wing and spend 10 minutes a week with them, just giving them little tips like, hey, I did this and it took me 3 years to recover from it. How about you not do that? And I just gave you 3 years.
Well, I look at school. Susan Ryder, who's like my godmom, I would have never finished school without her. She would be like, time's going by anyway, just take a class. Just take one class. What if you just take a class? Time's going by anyway. Why don't you take 2 classes this time? And then, towards the end, I started taking 3 classes. And, it took me 27 years, but I got it done. And, just the fact that she cared.
It took her 27 years.
For real. It really did. I graduated in 2018. I'm 51. Yeah. It took a minute.
But she did it.
I got a marketing
degree.
It.
You were like literally the super senior from hell.
Making it my bitch, Kendall. That's what I do.
It's the story of our life, just making shit our bitch. Making shit our bitch. But I love you, Jody.
Ask yourself what would Johnny Cash do. I love you too.
I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye, Western. Love you.